Good afternoon, everybody. It's P.J. Norwood from Fire Engineering with today, March 25th, 2020's Google Hangout. While today we're in a little different time than what we were 2, 3, 4 weeks ago in the fire and EMS world, today we're hoping to give you a little bit of a break and a little different focus from everything going on in the world with COVID-19. While it's obviously fresh in all of our thoughts and it's a concern for all of us, for our brothers and our sisters, as well as our family and friends, we felt today that it's important to stay on task and make sure that we don't forget the core mission of the fire service. While COVID-19 is a huge part of what we're all doing right now and what we're all concerned about, it is also very important for us to remember the core mission and making sure that the rest of our job doesn't get away from us. So today we have a great group of individuals on, and we're going to talk about the safety officer's role as it applies to construction incidents. But before we get started with the topic, we have Chief Walton on today, whose world has definitely not stopped, and he's here to chat with us briefly. Hopefully he'll give us some insight on FDIC, one of all of our concerns outside of our local concerns, our local fire departments, and as well as he'll probably tee it up really well, as he always does with our topic of the day. So Chief, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, PJ. Thank you, Frank. It's great to see everybody. Hey, real quickly, everyone, just to dovetail off of PJ's comments there, obviously we're in unprecedented times. These are uncharted waters, but the fire service obviously, as always, has risen to the challenge and is doing exemplary work everywhere across the country. That being said, I apologize. I may not be able to stay on for the entire program. I've got several pressing needs. We're in a very fluid situation as regards to FDIC. I know many of you received a survey about some potential dates we're looking at. So we're working right now at looking at how we would construct within those dates. Obviously, there are things going on in that time frame that normally wouldn't be going on, like football games and the Indy 500 and some other little things that happen in Indianapolis that we're trying to work with and around. So that being said, we're obviously talking with our friends there and seeing what we can do to put together the world's greatest celebration of firefighting that I know many of you are looking forward to, and doing it in a way that doesn't diminish what we've always done, but continues this long tradition. It's probably worth noting that the FDIC was started in 1928. 1929 was not exactly a banner year for things happening in America. That was the Great Depression began. That was the stock market crash. Obviously a radically different type of event than what we're dealing with now. So it's a very fluid situation. I'm not going to go into all this stuff that's on the news. You're all watching the news as we are, and paying attention to the FEMA briefings, which we all participate in every day, and trying to keep abreast of the really dynamically changing nature of this thing on almost a daily basis, right? With the I don't want to use the word cures, but the treatments and vaccines and things, which obviously, again, American ingenuity and American science and American, resolve is pushing at a pace unparalleled across the world. I will throw out one quote which keeps resonating in my mind from James Steve Hornfischer, who's one of my favorite authors. He wrote The Fleet at Flood Tide, Neptune's Inferno, Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors. Those are just among a few of the incredible books he's written. But in one of his books, he had a line, and I can't find it. I feel terrible because I love this guy. But he said, during World War II, our enemies underestimated the courage and resolve of America when our back's against the wall. And I think COVID-19 is going to experience the same demise because of the courage and resolve of America when her back's against the wall. So that being said, we're looking at a variety of options for FDIC, and we'll be getting that information out quickly. Some of the stuff that we're experiencing here in relation to our topic, which I think is a really important topic, right? One of the things to remember is that we recently had a NFPA and others put out some really good safety guidelines for construction sites, right? About having a representative on site available to meet us when we roll up and all of those things, which is a wonderful thing in normal times. These aren't normal times. So we are having conversation here about not to expect that level of support from the sites, obviously. And so as safety officers and people who always put safety first and foremost. Actually, according to Mike Rowe, we put it third, which I love. Always Google that Mike Rowe safety third video. Well worth watching over and over again. But, you know, making sure that, you know, in a great, read a great piece which will be coming out, gosh, I think next month or the month after, with Mike Champo about responding to construction sites, right? Always remembering that they're construction sites, so they evolve daily with dynamic problems. One day you may have green concrete there, the next day there may be steel work going on there, guys might be tying iron. So, you know, and then just navigating all of those, you know, uncompleted elevator shafts, ladders that were made, which are not really ladders by any, you know, by any reasonable standard, but nonetheless accessible to us and possibly require us using them. So, you know, as a safety officer, and I think that whenever you're responding to a construction, someone should be designated beyond the officers, if possible, and I know with staffing limitations, just to have that super heightened awareness. Construction sites are just the devil's playground when it comes to the opportunity for unpredictable and unforeseeable hazards, right? So just throwing that out there. But I really wanted to thank PJ and Frank for helping us reconnect with the normalcy that we need to reconnect with. The job goes on despite this, and the job is the job, and this is just another layer of complexity that's getting thrown on us. But you know, I look at these faces here. It's just another day at the job. To steal from our SEAL buddies, the only easy day was yesterday. You know, today is today. You know, what do you got? Here we are, right? So we're looking at that here. We're not taking for granted that we may not be met by a member of the site to help us navigate. We're also not taking for granted that security issues, which normally exist at most of our stuff here in Oklahoma, probably won't be there. You know, that when we get to a construction site for an issue, it's probably going to be coming to us from either an urban outdoorsman who's taking up temporary residency at the construction site due to opportunity. And I think that's the modern day colloquial for what we used to call hobos. I think they're now called urban outdoorsmen. So right? I'm just trying to be correct here. That's probably going to go away pretty fast. I think people are pretty fed up with that identity politics gibberish. I'll throw that in there because I can. I'm old, and I'm sick of it. But anyway, you know, it may be folks that have taken up temporary residence out of opportunity, and I don't blame them in the least for doing that. Or it may be a passerby who sees something, maybe a column of smoke or maybe something unusual. So you may not have the usual security. You certainly may not have the crews that normally guided us through there, or you may have them in some kind of reduced capacity. The other thing to think about is the degradation due to weather, wind, and things that aren't getting the daily attention that they would be if a crew was obviously functioning. So we've got to keep that in the back of our minds. And I know with Mike and our other guests and PJ and Frank, they can talk about, you know, things to look for there. Here in Oklahoma, we've been experiencing some unusually heavy rains. And in Oklahoma, if you dig a hole in 3 days, you've got a lake. So because our soil type retains the water. We don't have a lot of seepage, right? A lot of limestone shale and things like that. So you literally can dig a hole and have a pond. So unlike places like New Mexico and other places in the Southwest where that type C soil just drains very quickly, we don't have that. So at a construction site, that standing water could be an issue for us, and it could be weakening all the ground supports and things. Normally the drainage might have been, you know, managed more effectively with a crew there. So that's in the forefront with us. And now with spring coming, you know, we're getting ready for those storms that roll through here with, you know, hurricane force winds at the drop of a hat. We're Tornado Alley. So, and we're known for the tornadoes, but what you have to keep in mind here is that we're in that region of the country where the warm air masses and the cool air masses meet in springtime, and that causes these incredibly violent storms. And if you've got a construction site, they're vulnerable because all the reinforcement isn't there yet. So if you have a construction site that's been, I know not the word abandoned, but temporarily abandoned, you got to have that in the back of your mind, that the winds that we've had recently and the rains that we've had could be affecting it. And I know it's true in your neck of the woods also, but I know in Connecticut, which is basically a Republican ghetto with just rich people, Frank doesn't have that problem because they can control the weather there. I've read it. It's amazing. So I'm just kidding. So anyway, we're worried about weather concerns. We're worried about temporary occupancy. We're worried about just degradation of materials for a lack of attention, and we're worried about a lack of interface that we normally would get at construction sites. So all of those things are paramount. So any additional layers of protection that you can think of, I have, and I have failed to. I've had my men sometimes wear ball caps into construction responses. I wouldn't do that today. I'd go full helmet. I wouldn't dare go near a construction site today without, all my PPE on, irrespective of what aspect of that site they're telling me, the event might be in. I'm worried about debris falling. I'm worried about unsecured beams. Everything for me is on, code red, heightened alert. So those are just my thoughts. I thought I'd throw them out to the group. And again, I apologize. I'm just absolutely being pulled in about 11 different directions, but I'm very pleased to be on here talking about fire.
Well, Chief, we really appreciate you, and we appreciate you to speak for Frank, and myself, and our other guests today. Really appreciate you and the FDIC board and your staff on what you're doing to make these unfortunate, difficult decisions. I can only imagine how agonizing it was for all of you, but in mind of keeping all the staff, the workers of Indianapolis, the visitors of Indianapolis, as well as all the fire service, which we represent the entire fire service, all one place at one time. Unfortunately, I know that you made the right decision, but we appreciate you looking out for all of us today, tomorrow, and with FDIC. We look forward to future plans and being involved in those.
And to be clear, right now it's a postponement. We are, as many of you know, you received the survey. We're looking at some dates in September. If we can make them work, we're going to make them work. We've got a great many friends in Indianapolis who are trying to move heaven and earth so that we can do this. We've gotten tremendous response from the fire service. Overwhelmingly, firefighters overwhelmingly want us to do it. Our vendor community overwhelmingly want us to do it. Now it's the logistics, right? And how will that look, and how much can we do? And you know what I mean? So it's constantly evolving. We're working on it. I won't say 24/7, but it feels like 24/7. But then again, remember, I'm old, so I used to nap most of the day and just throw cards in a hat. They're not letting me do that anymore. They've even stopped the shuffleboard here at the home. We're not, so, but we're really doing everything we can. So, and if anybody has a suggestion or a thought, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm actually currently active on Facebook because while Zuckerberg and his people were on vacation, I snuck out of Facebook prison and opened up another page. And because on my other page, they made me a public figure, I couldn't talk to anybody. So now I'm able to talk to you. It's really cool. So as soon as they'll probably catch me again and lock me up. But so right now I'm like a normal person on Facebook. I'm having a blast. And I didn't know how many people like to take pictures of their food. So God bless you.
You too, Chief. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. So in order to move this conversation along and get to our topic today and to start talking about some construction sites, I think Chief Walton did a great job teed up. And turn it over to Frank, who actually set this up today to introduce our guests and get his thoughts.
Thanks, PJ. We got two great guests. One happens to be my brother, who's a retired battalion chief from Middletown, Connecticut, but he's a safety officer for Gilbane Construction, which is one of the largest construction companies in America. And we have Mike Wallingford, which his name confuses everybody because John and I grew up in the town of Wallingford, Connecticut. So Mike has his own name. He's not a town, but he was teaching for the first time at FDIC this year about construction accidents. And it's not just construction accidents. It's working with the safety officer for construction companies, whether it's a construction site where somebody gets injured or whether there's a fire. There's so many considerations. And just in the last 2 years in New Haven alone, it was kind of ironic. It seemed like we went a long time without having any major construction accidents. Then we started drilling and doing rope operations with tower crane operators and really working with the safety officers. And next thing you know, we just had an uptick in construction accidents, a transformer that fell on a guy where we had to use a crane to lift them, a worker that fell over 14 feet where we had to do a Stokes basket operation and lift them out of the foundation hole. We had a scissor lift fall over that was up, I think, 20 feet with 2 workers on it. So in the city, we're seeing an uptick. And the first time that a fire officer meets at a construction site, they should at least know who the players are. And now we're faced with this coronavirus where, as Bobby Halton explained, there might not be anybody there to meet you, which tends to be the fire department's biggest problem at construction accidents. But even in Connecticut, there's not one size fits all. Yale shut down construction, but Hartford's still working. And our governor, which I'm usually the least person that you would expect to give him some credit, I'll give him some credit, is he determined that construction was still an essential or critical service. So construction is still working. And even better than that, he left the package stores and the gun stores open. So Ned Lamont gets a star as he's trying to keep at least the economic engine of having construction listed as an essential service. But smaller communities are taking it on their own to say, hey, we're not doing it now. So you don't know what you're going to find. You may find an active construction site. So I'm going to start off with Mike Wallingford. Mike, it's an honor to have you on. Mike's a captain in Louisville, Kentucky, and he's on a Hazmat Engine, and he's a safety officer for a construction company, and he was coming to FDIC. So Mike, we'll let you start off this conversation, and then we'll kind of bounce it back and forth.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. So Mike Wallingford here I'm a captain here at Jeffersontown Fire and EMS, which is a suburb of Louisville, Kentucky. So we're protecting about 35 to 40 square miles and have about 90,000 people here in our community. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be out here. It's something I was hoping to bring to FDIC to help out, and I'm sure as we've talked about, Bobby and the rest of that great group is trying to help me out with this. It was a complete bummer. Poor Frank talked about just blowing a bulb in his projector screen when he got started. His first year at FDIC, I said, "Well, I've got the coronavirus stopping me, so that trumps your blown screen. They can replace that bulb pretty easy." But yeah, so it is, one of the biggest things that I've started to notice, and I even had some people that started asking me prior to FDIC coming up is, man, we're starting to see a lot of these large apartment style condo complexes ablaze across our country over the last couple of months. And I think a few people may have thought I was up to that to try to boost my numbers for my class in April, but that wasn't the case. So truly what I'm trying to do is trying to get a lot of us as big dumb firemen in some cases to think kind of outside the box when you start to see construction gate go up and fencing go up around a project, that it's a lot deeper than that. Us as firefighters try to take so much time of pre-planning or doing target hazard surveys of buildings once they're complete and they're ready for people to move into. But one of the big things we miss out on is all of the work that took it to get it to that point. With trenching operations or confined space operations or individuals working at heights. And one of the biggest issues for all of us is access. We have wonderful equipment across the country, and I don't care what type of community you're in, whether it's all volunteer or combination or fully paid, it doesn't really matter. We're all going to face the same exact issues because there's construction going on everywhere. So these accidents are on a rise. Trench, as last I saw, we've had about 10 trench deaths across the United States that have been reported so far this year. That number rises a little bit more rapidly than I'd like to see it happen. But one of those things is I want to educate our emergency responders so that when they're at a construction site, they know when something looks wrong versus riding by and thinking, I hope everything's okay. So we've done some small things here in the community here as well, just kind of doing some dirt basics for some of our responders to kind of help them better understand. Because we did have a response where they asked for the trench rescue team because they weren't aware whether or not the trench was safe or not, which was a great call on their part, 100%. Because if you don't know, you need to call for someone that does. So trying to get out and educate more. So that's one of the big things that I was hoping to focus on, and will focus on in the future once given that opportunity to get back up to Indy.
Mike, one of the things that we've been recommending on construction sites is one we want, and I think your point is great on saying that we want to get out there before it's built. And to Bobby Halton's point, it's critical, especially when OSHA finds construction companies, if they don't have steel toe boots and they don't have hard hats on, it's almost insulting to the culture when you walk on to a construction site and everybody's got a baseball cap and sneakers on. So to Bobby's point of, hey, you got to pay the respect, and also now with wind and everything else. So everybody, when you're pre-planning, should have steel toe boots and hard helmets. But one thing that we try to do in New Haven, and I'll pass it to John to answer first, and then we'll go back to you, is we try to tell the construction companies that when there's an accident, or even if there's a fire, we want 2 people to meet us at the gate. Because the hardest thing that we found in our city is finding the location, whatever it may be, even if it's just a sick call, is that you get there and it seems that nobody knows where the location is. Even worse is they send somebody to the gate who doesn't know where the location is, and they just told them, hey, there's an incident here, go to the gate. We try to tell the safety officers in the city for the construction companies that when there's an incident, we want 2 people at the gate, and one of them should have at least seen the actual incident, knows where it is. I mean, he doesn't have to be, or she doesn't have to be there when it actually happened, but they had to have eyes on the incident so that who's ever trying to run that incident from the construction company, take one of the people that are there and say, I need you to go to the gate, and then have a competent person with authority be that second person at the gate. And when I mean competent person with authority, means that when we go in with that individual and we say we want that loader or we want that crane, somebody who has the authority to make it happen. I'll go to John first, and then we'll go to Mike. John, go ahead. You're muted.
Good afternoon, all. Yeah, to reiterate that, there's a couple of things that we do, especially the bigger companies do. And Mike, you may speak otherwise for smaller ones. We put together an emergency action plan. And it's not just done by the safety department, it's done by all superintendents and project managers, so things don't get overlooked. I'm fortunate our next big project is going to be in New Haven. So a shout out to both New Haven Fire Marshal's office and the Yale Fire Marshal's office. We've already met and discussed a lot of issues, including accessibility. You know, what are they looking for, apparatus placement and all that, way ahead of time. Like I said, we haven't even broken ground yet. So we are ahead of that on that. What needs to be also reiterated, not necessarily just new construction, like Bobby Halt mentioned earlier. You have, with the economy being as strong as it is, a lot of renovation projects going on that you may not even have awareness when you pull up that you're not going to have the fences and the banners being hung up for new construction. So that's something that in your pre-planning, you may visited the building 3 months ago and say, I know the footprint. And then as you enter in, you're like, oh, when did this happen? So definitely is something we normally don't run into a burning building. You definitely don't want to run into any type of building that you may assume is under construction or not, because your layout is going to be completely different. And I'm talking major renovations are going on nowadays that people can afford to do it. But to go back to the emergency action plan, definitely, I don't care how big or small you are, you definitely need to meet with the fire departments. And the construction companies I've seen over the past have made that initiative for most places. I'm sure it's not everywhere. But for Gilbane, it's a tendency for us to meet with the fire departments before construction begins and during.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that's great. one of the things that we've done here, my construction company, it does everything from construction all the way down to paving. We have about 520 employees. So for the local area here, it's a fairly large construction company for the city of Louisville. And we do the outskirts as well. But one of my biggest pushes has been emergency response plans. And one of the biggest things trying to get across to everybody while we were doing all of our regulatory training this year was, do you know the address of where you are? Because in a lot of cases, when you start a construction project, there isn't an address. So whether it's putting on the emergency action plan, giving them actual coordinates of where they can report that to, or having a physical address that they know it's going to be. Because for us as emergency responders, when you pull up a mapping program or anything, it may not exist. So that's one of those more important reasons to be out in your district, to see when new things are coming up, and trying to spread that word amongst everybody. Hey, at the shift change at the table in the morning, we noticed such and such is going on over there. You all ought to ride by and check it out. So it's really going to take a lot of communication, but those emergency response plans are so helpful. And also trying to get the construction crews to understand that depending on where you are, the limitations of your local emergency responders may be pretty limited. So we can't always think, hey, I just passed a firehouse and guess what? There's people there and it's 2 miles down the road and we should be fine. That's why it's really a two-part thing. The fire department has to reach out, but the construction companies have to be truly willful to work with the local responders.
Mike, and then I'll go to Bobby. One thing that I've seen across the country, though, is the construction industry makes the incident action plan and they share it with the fire marshal's office, and that's where it stops. And that's why the company officers still play that critical role, because it's amazing. Because preparing for this, I started talking to people across, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that goes to the fire marshal's office." Well, there's got to be a link from the fire marshal's office, and you got to get out in the community, and you got to start making these connections. And one thing that we found very valuable in New Haven is once we started working with the different construction companies and Yale, we found that they were more than willing to kind of give us a little piece of their site so we can do our annual confined space research, our high angle stuff, work with their crane operators. And, we went above and beyond. For example, when we were working with a high angle crane, a tower crane, they said, listen, we'll do anything you want, but once the guy goes up there, he doesn't want to come down. So if you're going to do, at the end of the day, he's ready to come down. So if you guys want to drill, you got to be here at 4 a.m. So we worked with the union. We worked with Chief Alston. We got it set up, brought all 4 shifts through, and eventually lowered him down. And we even invited federal OSHA to the site, and federal OSHA, just the connections from that alone was unbelievable. So you got to make sure that the incident action plan doesn't stop at your fire marshal's office. So if you're in a firehouse today, volunteer or career, and you're looking around and you say, wait a second, I don't see any incident action plan for any construction we had. Well, there's a breach in the system, and we need to jump on that. Bobby, jump in.
Well, a couple of things, and great lead in, Frank. Remember, there's plenty to drill on too at this time. Like if you've got a site and you're trying to stay available, you're diamond webbing, right? When you're putting somebody in a Stokes basket or putting them on a board, all of that stuff, hooking your rigging up to, say, alternative sources for, extricating somebody, whether it's a bucket or a tower or things like that. That's stuff that you can practice on the pad without even leaving the house, right? You could throw a couple of blankets in there to mock a patient, do your webbing, because if you're going to practice that at the scene, no. So, those are the kinds of things, that kind of training can be happening now. If you're not big on EMS, remember, you may need to do some basic stabilization of fractures. You may have to do some basic head injury assessment stuff. Think about the common injuries that happen on construction sites. It's basically impaled, it's hit by, it's fractured, it's falls. Some of it, some pretty straightforward categories, right? Burns from torches, things like that. Just the stuff that I can think off the top of my head that I responded to. But oftentimes you're moving a patient through some pretty interesting, ground, if you will, right? Down shafts that may not be completed, off of ladders that may not be right. you may have to take them from level to level. So you really want to get that patient packaging down. Whether you do EMS or not, you're going to be doing EMS, because you can't just throw these people over the wall because your local ambulance brigade or ambulance company can't enter that site for whatever reasons, don't have the right PPE or don't have the right training. So irrespective of who's coming, we all need to be able to do those basic fundamental packaging skills and assessment skills. And Frank was talking about some of the more dramatic rescues we've seen over time. I don't know how many of the younger people probably don't remember this, but back in like '99, the Atlanta guys had to do a rescue of a crane operator. And by golly, that I'm going to make up a number, but I'm going to say it was like 13 stories high, right? Or it was a phenomenal height. And they brought him in by helicopter. You remember that? And then he worked with the crane guy. I mean, it was just like this most amazing rescue. And I'm old, so I'm probably adding 4 or 5 different, it's like a fish story. I'm probably adding 4 or 5 different rescues into one. But imagine the complexity that can evolve very quickly on a construction site, especially one that's going, above 10, 15, 20 stories. I mean, it can get hairy fast. So, you want to be thinking about all of those things and how are you going to do them and what tools you're going to need. And if you're going to rely, it's just like water. Never trust anybody to bring your water. And so anybody, I don't care if it's your brother John. I don't even trust your brother John to bring you your water. If you're going to rely on somebody else to bring you your water at a fire, you're an idiot. And you're equally as incompetent if you're going to trust them to bring the fundamental skills and tools that you need at a construction site, whether those are EMS, basic extrication, stabilization, cutting. So we know the things we could be in store for. So there's some great drills right there. Sitting down with your new people and saying, okay, we're rolling up on a construction site, and I tell you, get the tools. What are you going to get? Okay, it's not just a Halligan and a flathead at this thing, right? It could be, a gas cutter. It could be all kinds of things. But, we forget that some of the folks we're riding with haven't been on the job since the 70s and haven't been, they don't have the knowledge that John and Mike and PJ and Frank have. That they've got what they've got. So going through that helps people to be ready when it happens. It eliminates some of that uncertainty. So really, not just visiting the sites, but assessing the sites for what you might need when you get there, and then making sure that if you're going to have a Stokes basket on your rig, that one's coming. You know what I mean? And if you don't have you should at least have a backboard and know how to use it and know when to use it, right? So a lot of really fascinating things to think about. And some of the most horrific events we can remember have been these buildings under construction. Remember the big collapse we just had? Where was that? It was a huge collapse recently.
The crane collapse recently was in Seattle.
There was a crane, but there was a whole building that failed. Was that
New Orleans?
New Orleans.
Yeah, it was a casino.
Yeah. Wow. There's a big day for you, right? And so, the magnitude of these things can grow very, very quickly with assisting agencies and to John can probably speak to this better. It's just like a restaurant fire. Once the fire's out, that's just the beginning of the ordeal for those people, because there's a myriad of agencies that are going to want to come in, especially if it's an injury, to figure out how it happened, OSHA, all of those good people. But even on top of that, the corporate probably has people, then the state probably has people, and the city has people. But if it's got to do with a failure of a component, man, that takes you to a whole nother level. Or if we have to compromise a component in order to effect a rescue, that's a big day too. So just a lot of really, it's a great topic. I mean, this is a topic, Mike, I can't wait to see your class, because this is a topic that, really needs a lot more attention. We've got Brannigan, we've got a lot of great building construction books, but it might be a really great book or manual to think about, common construction responses. You know what I mean? Because there could be some green concrete, steel failure, scaffolding failure, all kinds of, fire, all kinds of great stuff that you could just, it writes itself. So I think it'd be amazing. I apologize. I just got a notice that I got to bail, so I'm going to leave early. To everybody out there, thank you so much for the tenacity and perseverance that the American Fire Service is showing, the composure. When everybody else is running around with their hair on fire, it's nice to see that ours isn't. You know what I mean? And I haven't met anybody who's people are cautious and they're being vigilant, but they're not intimidated and they're not scared, and they're not the least bit hesitant to do their jobs. And that's a testament to the men and women who choose this profession. There's that great line by and I can't remember exactly. I want to say Thucydides, but it may not be, where he said, out of every 100 men they send me, 90 are just cannon fodder, 9 are warriors, but one will bring them home. The fire service is the one. We're going to get through this, and we're going to come out the other side even better than we were before this began. That happens with every disruption, with every serious thing that we go through. Americans go through it and come out better on the other side. It's just who we are. It's our innate DNA. It's just you can't stop it. No matter how hard some people are trying, you can't stop it. So God bless you, everybody, for doing this. Thank you very much for allowing me to visit very shortly. I apologize. I've got a few things I just have to address immediately. So thank you so much, and I appreciate having been allowed to appear.
Thanks, Chief. We appreciate it. Your mind hasn't gone yet. April of 1999, City of Atlanta. Dennis Rubin was the chief, and your friend and our friend David Rhodes was also involved in that incident. So
that's right. And I'm trying to remember who the kid. I used to know the name of the kid who was on the rescue.
Yeah, I had to look it up. I did use Google to get the date to see how accurate you were. You were right on.
I'll never forget, because we heard that they did a presentation at FDIC, and Salka was coming out next, and we're all back there, as we do in the green room, jibing each other and kidding. And Salka goes, "Sheesh, I feel like a sack of garbage going out after this kid." It's like, only John could come up with a line like that. I feel like a sack of garbage. And it's like, okay, get out there. All right, love you guys. Bye now.
Thanks, Bobby. PJ, I'm going to go to you with this first, and then we'll go around the horn. One of the things that seems to be a problem is that firefighters, they take that one rescue class, they get the rescue rocker, and they think when there's a construction accident, they're going to show up there and they're not going to need any help and they're going to be able to handle it. And that's almost a recipe for disaster. And even in New Haven, we know that we're going to rely on the individuals at the construction company to help us mitigate whatever is going on regardless of the incident. So one of the things that I tell my company officers to do is that once you locate the scene, whatever it is, ask whoever is the construction supervisor, safety officer, to get their personnel in a couple groups that we can utilize. And by just saying that right off the bat, it takes away a lot of that tension of I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It kind of breaks everything down to say, hey, we're going to utilize you in a capacity, because a lot of times they may have a lot more expertise than even the firefighters who's on scene. I mean, I might have somebody in New Haven show up that's 100% squared away company, and the next day it may be a company that never been to a construction accident. So how do you do it in East Haven?
Frank, and that's where I bring a little different spin, because I agree completely, but we don't have the depth of the bullpen like New Haven or a lot of other departments in the area actually have. We run 11 per shift. That's not enough to run an incident like we're talking today. So I think now in the state of time that we're in now with this, everybody's concerned about social distancing and no live face-to-face training, and maybe construction sites working on a limited schedule or less personnel. It's a perfect time for departments like all departments, but especially departments like mine, to really get onto a site, do a walkthrough, and figure out what do we actually need, right? If we have an incident of X, Y, or Z, what do I actually need to mitigate this incident? Could I handle this with my 11 on staff, or who are we going to need to call? And if we can't handle it, making sure it's not, I'm out, there's nothing we can do here. No, because there's a lot we can do. Taking it like a hazardous material is to identify the issue, try to mitigate, dam, dike, prevent further harm, and denying any other people from screwing that scene up even more could be extremely helpful. And a significant incident I was at many years ago, construction incident during the building of the Lake Saltonstall Bridge. Right, they had a construction where they lifted a steel girder and it spun, and they put 2 people in the water. We used the construction company there because they were much more versed than any one of us at getting those 2 individuals out of the water. They got them out of the water using their equipment, and they brought those victims to us who were injured and rapidly transported. So when you said before that some of those, construction workers, they're the experts on that incident. They're the experts on that property of what's going on, what's good, what's bad, what's stable, what's not stable, what we should be concerned about, what we don't have to be concerned about. And they probably have the equipment, let alone the knowledge to help us. But I think some people, some fire departments, some firefighters, some fire officers get I'm the incident commander, I'm wearing the white helmet, I'm in charge here, we can handle this, that old chest thumping. And they forget that, man, I would much rather have some good quality construction workers that know the equipment, know the scene, and know what's available to them than a couple companies of firefighters just, all right, what do we need to do here? So I think utilizing your resources and making sure that you get on these scenes, especially now when maybe these sites are not working to full capacity, to see what we need to bring to those incidents, and then working with our mutual aid partners to say, hey, New Haven, Chief Ricci, look, if we get this on this scene, this is what's going on. We only are capable of this. This is what we're going to need from you. Can you do that for us? And if you say no, okay, where are we going to next? So making sure we line that stuff up and have those conversations ahead of time.
We'll go with John, and then we'll go to Mike.
You're muted, John.
I got it. To reiterate, PJ, what you're saying, you got to look at it as basically putting together a unified command with the construction workers and getting somebody there to work with them. Their information, whether it's the superintendent, project manager, the foreman, and even the guy that's technically in the trench, no pun intended, their resources are going to be so invaluable. Speaking as head of the technical rescue at the time for the City of Middletown Fire Department, you have to rely on those on-site resources. There's no way I could have been able to see everything and go from there. One thing that also that I think safety in general overlooks, and Mike, you might be able to say it, we've come up with the rescue plans, we've come up with the notification, we do our orientation, we have our muster points. But I think safety right now, this day and age, misses is accountability. I say, because there's a lot of times where you go onto a job site, or I'll do an inspection. Well, how many guys you got working here? Oh, yeah, maybe 40. And when you do a head count, you got 60. All right. So, I mean, that's with my background. That's what I bring to Gilbane is also, I know within the first hour, and it does take about an hour to get acclimated of where everybody is. So when you do go speak to these construction companies, find out how they do accountability and then makes your job easier. Are you only looking for 2 people in the water after that thing swung, or are you looking for 3 or 4? If you have some type of a collapse issue, how many people are you looking for? Who was in that area? And that will also help you as the incident commander decide what resources you're going to need right off the bat.
John, I got to jump in there because you reminded me of something. When I called for USAR in 2011 and Hurricane Irene, that incident, that 1 mile stretch of property in East Haven, we lost just over 20 houses. We were operating well above our ability for staffing, manpower, and education. But I wasn't afraid to call for help. And
I remember that day very clearly.
When I remember you said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need you to take this and handle it." And we worked together. I wasn't afraid to call for help, and I wasn't afraid to say, "Look, this is what we've done. This is what we could do with what we have." And knowing that we have resources available, and not being afraid to lean on the professionals. In that case, it was USAR. We had a 1 mile stretch of property where we had houses that were gone. There was nothing left of some houses. Some were standing that looked like nothing happened to them, and some on many levels of partial collapse and full collapse. And we leaned on USAR. We leaned on the state asset to help us. And I think incident commanders need to be a little bit more proactive. I could have been a little bit more proactive that day, called a little bit earlier, but I was still in that mindset. We could get this. We got this. We got this.
We all learned. But going back to what you're saying, we work together as emergency personnel and emergency personnel. What the fire service is missing, whether it be stereotypical or not, these construction workers, they're brilliant when it comes to knowing their trade and what they do. I have learned over the last 6 months here an astronomical amount of information on how these guys really do know their jobs and how they can assist the fire department. you know, and I was on the other side and I looked at a construction worker, maybe definitely not like I should have. So I've come a long way in realizing that they're a valuable asset.
John, before I go to Mike, you were at the energy plant explosion in Middletown, and when they were trying to find accountability for workers, didn't they have the police run the license plates in the parking lot to try to figure out, kind of get a baseline for accountability because they were worried about still missing people?
Correct. There was a few avenues the police departments utilized. One, they try to do the on-site accountability, which was no longer there due to the explosion. Again, you're trying to find personnel who remember who was working there and who wasn't there. It was kind of unique because it was Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, just to think about it, that was 10 years ago, this past February. So, but a lot of lessons were learned regarding accountability on the construction site. But the PD is going to use license plates. They're going to use everything you have. I keep a database, little green, with all the accountability on it. So any one of my superintendents or foremen during orientation know that green clipboard is accountability for everybody on site. So if I'm not around, they grab that, they can report to the muster point or give the incident commander that sheet, and they got full accountability of what company and how many personnel they had. And I could even expand on it more, but I know time is running out.
Mike, you want to weigh in on all this?
Yeah, no, they bring up a awesome point about accountability, about trying to get that that know-how person in there. We know how to put out fires. We know how to do, you know, specific things in the emergency response world, but it's no different than in showing up to an industrial plant where the first person I'm asking for is the maintenance supervisor, because nobody knows that place better than those people. But one of the things that I was hoping to share, or I will share whenever we get the opportunity, was I created a form to kind of help the emergency responders, and I'd print hundreds of copies and let people take it with them. So when they go out to these job sites, they have questions to ask of the construction workers. It doesn't have to be the safety person. It could be the foreman that's there, or the superintendent or project manager. But, you know, like, what is the posted or assigned address, or what are your closest cross streets? And you do that. Well, then trying to identify your closest water sources, because for a lot of people, these buildings are being built, but the water sources aren't there yet. So what are your closest ones? Then talking about some of your access concerns and estimated trenching depths, something to kind of help jog the memory of the emergency responders, because these are not things we typically look for. The accountability one, and John, I've spoken, I did safety consulting prior to going to work for the construction company, and I traveled all over the U.S. going to energy plants, and that incident was actually one that I brought up in most every single class. And one of the biggest things was, how do we ensure we have everybody? So every construction company does it a little bit different, all the way down from the mom and pop that's going to know that they have their 2 or 3 people, to someone that's overseeing several hundred at a construction site. But this is almost going to be like responding to a hazmat scene, where it's going to be a hurry up and wait for a moment until we can assess exactly what's going on, because we're not going to be able to rush right into some of these things. And I think that's the reason why the more preparedness we can do on the front side with our companies, with our crews in our first alarm districts, or as PJ said, you know, kind of assessing what needs I'm going to have when I get to a specific point, and then finding out those needs before that bell goes off or before that tone goes off. That's the point we're at now, because the economy's pretty good for the moment. We're going to see what happens in regards to this and how it affects. We have been unaffected in the construction business here. Everybody's working full days. I have full crews. So it has not affected us to this point. But we're going to see what it does to the building industry, because right now it's booming. There's stuff going up everywhere. So where you thought there was a field or an empty parking lot, that's going to go away very soon. And we as emergency responders truly have to prepare for that.
When we talked about accountability, there's something else that's really critical, and I call it the guy or girl with the cell phone. So we experienced this in New Haven with hazmats, also construction accidents. And it's something that we always say we want to create a bullpen. We want to, when we get that competent person, they tend to get on their cell phone and they have mission creep and they start walking away. So you need to essentially assign one of your firefighters with this person to make sure that they're locked in your command post or next to your command post. Because once they get away, it's tough to get them back. I had a worker who had acid spilled on him, and the person who was making all the decisions for the company was there 1 second, and the next minute we had to go track them down and drag them back. So creating a bullpen at a construction accident or a hazmat incident makes a lot of sense, and it keeps the individuals who have that expertise there. I'll give you a quick example. New Haven had a worker fall down a smokestack, and because they kept a bullpen of the different trades that were on scene, Captain Greg Boyven looked at one of the stacks of people we had in staging there and said, we're going to start a cutting operation. Can you get your guys to keep giving us saws and keep changing out the blades as we're cutting? And the construction workers, even though it was a tragic scene, they were elated to be part of the rescue. And those guys were like Johnny on the spot. As soon as they were cutting, the next saw was ready to go. And they kind of built up that relationship. But I'll go to John and then we'll go to PJ and back to Mike. Having that bullpen or that individual stay put is critical. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. But also keep in mind, too, it all depends on the severity of the incident. If it's an isolated incident, it's one thing. You have a major event. No one's going to be at your muster point. Everybody is going to go into self-preservation and they're going to disappear. So don't give everybody the false hope that, hey, once there's an incident, you're going to have people there. It all depends on what size of your incident and what you have. Say clean energy, there was nobody waiting. They all went for shelter. They all went to seek help. So that was problem number one. That's from the start. If you got just an isolated incident where you got a worker trapped or hurt, then you're going to have people waiting there. So just keep that in mind. But it is important to keep everybody there.
So, John, in that situation, based on your experience, would you recommend you pull up into a significant widespread incident like the clean energy plant? Is even if you have nobody, still establishing that place, that ground zero, and giving everybody a safe place to come back to start putting that together? You still would recommend for an incident commander going and finding those resources, put yourself in one central location, and then start sending out other resources to bring them back to you. Would that be correct?
Oh, absolutely. It's a vital resource. You need those guys there for you to mitigate the incident, without a doubt.
But if you're not in one place, if you get that roaming incident commander mindset,
you're going to be lost.
You're going to be lost.
You'll be lost.
You may not have anybody. You may not have a place. You need to say, this is where I'm establishing my command post, and you grab whoever you can. You go find those resources. You bring them
back to you. Absolutely.
You may need to move that command post. That may not be in the most ideal spot, but you need to at least landlock a piece of your property at that point to move forward.
I agree. Absolutely.
PJ, before I go to Mike, with the command post, is if you're West Coast and you're in a car, you got to get locked in the car. If you're East Coast, you got to be locked into wherever your command post is. And when you're on a construction accident as a chief, especially for any construction accident, where you locate your command post, where normally our responders are so tuned into, this is side A or side 1, side 2, 3, Alpha Bravo, Charlie Delta, wherever your command post is, when that incident commander establishes and announces the location of their command post, they should also explain over the radio quickly what the sides of the construction accident are. So we were doing a confined space drill in a barge. We set it up on the side. So as soon as Ryan DeVito got there, he set up the command post, and he said, the command post is set up on the Quinnipiac Avenue side. Quinnipiac Avenue side is side Alpha. Bravo is Ferry Street. Charlie is the Quinnipiac River. So now everybody who's operating now on the radio understands how we're designating and how we're talking about this construction site. Because as Mike said earlier, you might not have an address, and you may, as PJ said, you might set up the command post in an area that normally you wouldn't set it up. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think if you were to survey across the United States, how many incident commanders have ever had to command something at a large scale incident at any type of construction site, I think it's going to be a very small percentage. So while we focus so much on the frontline individuals that are on the engine companies, truck companies, rescues, so on and so forth, there is a lot of value to our upper command, because this could be something very new to them, and it makes it extremely hard to be progressive while being safe if it's an unknown. So I think that's another part of the whole value of educating people across the U.S. in how to prepare for these things, because the construction, it's just not stopping. So we're continuing to bids and things continue to come in, and the projects are getting larger and larger. And I know there's been a lot of scuttle on Facebook and other social medias about some of these extremely tall structures that are being built out of this engineered wood, and what kind of issues we're going to have. And they're going to pose issues. But every construction site is going to pose an issue, depending on the size of your organization. Everything from a small, single family home all the way up to those massive skyscrapers.
Mike, on Matchbook Construction, Fire Engineering's roundtable for the last month has been on response to matchstick construction. So please take a look at that. I'll get PJ, the Minister of Propaganda, to tweet that out. Also, I know John in Gilbane has been teaching all of their members on the construction site the new OSHA-approved crane signals. Have you done that with your fire department on the new signal that just came out, or are you a little bit behind the times?
We are. We have not. That is not something I've shared here within the organization. It's
okay. So here it is. So your normal crane signals. So this is very important. You put your hand like this to the crane operator, and you go like that. That means get the load off, my friend.
That's right. Yeah. So that is one I'll definitely have to make sure I get shared out. I'll make it Facebook official.
All right. So for all of our viewers, you just saw the look of panic on Mike's face, saying, "I got a class at FDIC. What's this guy doing to me?"
Yeah.
PJ, weigh in.
Yep. So I'm going to weigh in, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Frank, to kind of close out the show. One resource that we tend to forget about, because it's not so popular in the fire service, but it should be, especially in your training and your site assessments, is utilization of drones. We get a very small look at our incidents when we're walking around of these scenes. And Frank, you gave me that reminder when you mentioned Captain Bovey, recent retiree from the fire department, who's now doing drones in his actually third career now. And drones give you a great bird's eye view of actual incidents, but also during your training and your education, when you're doing that needs assessment, when you're doing your SWOT analysis, and you're trying to figure out what the hazards are, that's a great place to start. Get up, get a full bird's eye view of that entire area, because what you may think looks one way, when you get up 20 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, may be very different, and it may put that incident into a whole different ballgame. So, you guys, I really appreciate you being here today. Thanks for joining us. John, I always love seeing you, especially when I don't have a state trooper yelling in my face because we need to use their dogs. So thanks, brother. Frank, it's all yours.
PJ, on the drone thing, and Greg Boyven, he owns Skywise, and what's nice, what he does for construction industries, and if you're a firefighter, asking the incident action plan, if they have this, he actually goes out in periodic stages. So he'll go out on week 1 before they break ground, do a quick 360. They'll have that for the construction company. Then he goes out like the next week and does the same thing. So the drone footage actually goes into the incident action plan besides the actual emergency. And we had, 6 months ago, we had just a windy day that blew over a wall onto State Street, and we were able to utilize the drone to go up and get a look at it. John, we're at the witching hour, so I'm going to give my brother John, I really appreciated him coming on from Gilbane. And then you could pass it right to Mike for the last word. And as soon as we get word from FDIC when this is going to be, we'll be there to see Mike's class. I'll be sitting in the truck rocks at him and make him nervous. But I think it's going to be a great program. John, we'll leave it to you, and then to Mike, and then we're out for the day.
I just like to reiterate what everybody said. Definitely get off the rigs and get onto the sites. Is the best way to protect your companies and really protect the workers that are working for America right now. I mean, the construction industry is booming, and hopefully it stays that way for a long time. Mike, I look forward to talking with you even offline too as well. Everybody stay safe at this time.
Thanks, John. Mike, you want to take us out?
Yeah, thanks, John. I cannot agree with John even more. We have to do our part to take a look beyond that construction site sign. There's so much beyond that sign that all of us as emergency responders are truly unaware of, and we need to make sure, because every one of those jobs are fluid and they're moving. So let's please make sure that we're taking that time to get out and get a look.
Hey guys, that's it for today's Google Hangout. We really appreciate everybody coming on. Again, we wanted to give you a little bit of break from the coronavirus. All our members are out there across the country on the first line. The health department, this is a new rodeo for them, in a sense, with this day and age where the fire department does it every day. And we're very proud of the men and women of the fire department across the country who are answering the call every day. John, PJ, Mike, thank you so much. Mike, look forward to seeing you at FDIC, and we'll be talking to you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.